So, Michael, do you remember when we reviewed the movie Death Note?
A classic, faithful adaptation of the beloved anime.
Yes, and Netflix is doing it again. This time with Avatar: The Last Airbender. I know it's not technically an anime. Avatar: The Last Airbender, the new Netflix series, has been involved in some turmoil because the creators, Michael Dante DiMartino and also Brian Konietzko, they have left the project. They have said that basically whatever ends up in screen will not be the version that me and Brian, this is Michael talking, that me and Brian intended to make. He's also said it might turn out to be a show many of you end up enjoying, but yeah, it's not the one they wanted to make. So this is funny to me because obviously with Death Note, it was a beloved anime and Netflix completely butchered that, and it seems that they have not learned any of the lessons of Death Note and continue to just fuck up, because I can imagine that, I know Avatar: The Last Airbender, I haven't seen it, but it's one of the most beloved, cartoons ever, one of the best cartoons ever. All of that shit has been said about it, and they're getting rid of the creators. So not a good move, Michael.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so bizarre that you have this series which works very well, I would say. And I'm not one of those people who says, like, oh, Avatar: The Last Airbender is a 10 out of 10, because I just think ultimately, I hate to say it, but it is a kid's show, and there's some stuff in it that's really stupid. Like, suffice it to say, it's about a global war where literally nobody dies, which I always just... And I would say that I do like the idea of making a Avatar: The Last Airbender live-action remake, making it a bit more adult, maybe a bit more serious, having a bit more of a sense of peril, because obviously the original cartoon is for kids, like a 6-year-old could watch it and be fine. And to be honest, like, if that's what Netflix were going to do, if they were like, oh, we're going to make it a little bit more adult, but it sounds like, based on the fact that these creators of these very beloved characters, because people mostly like it for the characters, not the, childishness, if they've left, it's probably going to be shit. And to be honest, I mean, it's Netflix, so it's probably going to be shit anyway, but there we go.
Yeah, it is.
Netflix, more like not fixed.
That's good. That's real good.
Hello and welcome to Select and Reflect, the movie review podcast where we look at films that have come out in the near and distant past, we give them a couple of watches and evaluate them beyond first impressions. I'm your host Michael, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Luke, and this week we are celebrating the 25-year anniversary of the release of the film Clueless by reviewing that. So Luke, why don't you tell us a thing or two about the film Clueless?
Sure thing, Michael. So yes, as you said, it's been 25 years since Clueless came out. It's a 1995 American coming-of-age teen comedy film, written and directed by Amy Heckerling. It stars Alicia Silverstone, Stacey Dash, Paul Rudd, Dan Hedaya, and Brittany Murphy. It was released on July the 19th, 1995. So we're just over 25 years, about a month off the actual 25-year anniversary. And I don't know if you knew this, Michael, but it is based, or loosely based, on Jane Austen's 1815 novel Emma, with a modern-day setting of Beverly Hills. So,
yeah, they like doing that. I mean, they had that weird 1990s Romeo and Juliet starring Leonardo DiCaprio. Remember that?
I do remember that.
And it was like set in the future. Yeah, so there we go. They just make these old-fashioned films in the modern context. Love it.
It was a theme going back then. Yeah, quite popular. Anyway, Michael, can you tell me what the budget was for Clueless?
Well, I mean, it's, I don't know, like, how much? I guess, I don't know, like, 8 million.
$12
Okay,
million. Can you tell me what the box office was?
I mean, I don't know, like, this is literally one of those ones I literally have no idea, so I'm just going to go for what feels like a modest amount and go for, it made 10 times its money back, 120 million.
Oh, no, half that, Michael, half that.
60 million.
Yeah, 56.6.
Wow, okay. Yeah,
Not a lot. Yeah. For a movie that, for a movie that came out in 1995 and only making 56 million, you have to ask the question, well, why are we doing this movie? Why are we doing Clueless? Well, that's because it is a cult classic, as they say. Clueless has developed a cult following and has a continuing legacy. This is the thing, every time, like, and not just for movies we review, I look at movies that are like teen comedies featuring girls. They're always described as cult classics or have a cult following, which is quite weird to me.
It's because women are a cult.
Yeah, I guess so. That must be what it means. Anyway, maybe it's just because, like, middle-aged people don't like it, so therefore it has to be a cult classic, I guess. The film was followed by a spin-off television sitcom, a series of books, and Paramount Pictures has announced that they are producing a remake, although I looked it up, and I have seen no more evidence of this remake. When it's going to come out, who's going to be in it, nothing of that. So I was pretty safe.
Yeah, they probably announced loads of stuff, so
yeah, exactly.
Means nothing.
Exactly, Michael. So anyway, yes, this movie, Clueless, did you like it?
No, not really.
Oh, wow.
At the end of it, I just found myself thinking, what was the point of that? And I just, it was very weird. I think the good analogy, and I know you're going to mention this later, and maybe I shouldn't, but it was exactly what I was thinking. When we reviewed Mean Girls, and I was kind of saying how I'd only ever seen the first 2/3 of the film before, and how it really fell off in the final third, because it just seemed like the film completely lost any sense of direction. That was like, this film was like the entire third act of Mean Girls spread over a whole film. And
yes.
Yeah, that's my opinion. What do you think?
Yes, I definitely think lacking direction is the central issue with this. But having said that, which we'll get into, it is based off a novel, so maybe we should critique the novel for lacking direction. But anyway, yeah, I didn't like it that much either, to be honest. I mean, it was fine, not the worst thing I've ever seen, but obviously not great. And I suspect as well it wasn't really meant for me. You know, my our gender, shall I say, Michael? Not really meant for us. Kind of like Mean Girls, although I did enjoy Mean Girls more, I have to say, for the first hour.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. I mean, with this film, I was kind of just sat there thinking, like, I've seen Legally Blonde, which is a film which I feel like this film feels a lot like that, and it's about like a kind of ditzy person, let's say. I don't really know what the appropriate term is, but and I found that more enjoyable, which is, so I'd say in the grand scheme of things, I found this film I was just sat there staring at it, not really thinking much the whole time. So, yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, so shall we get on to nitpicks, Michael? How many nitpicks do you have for Clueless?
I've got 2.
I've got 1. So I'm going to go first. Okay, my only nitpick was quite, far to the end of the movie. Cher's dad is working on a multi-million-dollar lawsuit, and he's relying on a couple of kids, Josh and Cher, to make sure they get this right. I mean, look, maybe if he was struggling, he could draft his kids in, but obviously he's got a lot of money. The law firm is probably doing quite well. If I was him, I wouldn't have a couple of kids working on very important, aspects of this lawsuit with a deadline coming up. So I would not do that. So, if Cher fucks it up, it's not her fault. It's not even the guy who he was working with, or she was working with, fault, who lambasted her and called her a moron. No, it was, in fact, her dad for putting her in that position. So there you go.
When you're in charge, the buck stops with you.
Exactly. What's your nitpicks?
As for mine, so one, I'm kind of getting tired of pointing this out, but I just felt like it needs to point out every time in a film in the 90s somebody uses the word retarded or retard very casually. I just like pointing it out every single time. I don't really care, but it always sticks out to me. It's like, oh, there it is. And then, secondly, having a picture of somebody, an individual, because another person took that picture is really stupid. I'm of course referring to the guy who, I can't really remember his name, I think it's something like Elton or something like that. But,
you are correct, yes, Elton.
Oh, wow, that was great. And basically, he's got a picture of a girl in his locker. And then she's like, why do you have a picture of a girl in the locker? And he's like, because you took it. And that just seems like really weird logic to me. Like, yeah, I've got a picture of this woman who, I'm not attracted to her, but I'm attracted to the woman who took the photo. And I just think that's very strange. So, yeah.
Okay.
It's illogical.
So those are the nitpicks then. Let's get into the old plot. As I said, this movie, Clueless, is based on Jane Austen's 1815 novel, Emma, with a modern-day setting in Beverly Hills, Los Angeles. The plot centers on Cher Horowitz, played by Alicia Silverstone, a beautiful, clever, I don't know about that, and rich high school girl who befriends a new student named Ty and decides to give her a makeover. That's basically...
Yeah.
It's not a very interesting premise, obviously, but like I said, it is based on the book, and to be honest, Michael, I have not read Emma. I don't know about you.
No, yeah.
So I do not know how faithful it is. There is a whole section on Wikipedia detailing the comparisons between...
The parallels, as it were.
Yeah, between Emma and Clueless, and they get quite a bit of stuff correct. One thing I did like is... the Christian character in this movie, who turns out is gay. In Emma, he's actually married. So yeah,
okay. How progressive that is. Yeah, I mean, I sounded sarcastic, but that's actually, that's okay. I will say this idea, and this was immediately what jumped in my head, because I mentioned how I found out about the whole Emma thing in the context of somebody writing a post on Reddit, and they said the thing they said was, this film is much more clever than people, give it credit for. And pretty much their entire basis for evidencing that claim was that this film is based on this Jane Austen novel, Emma. And I guess the logic is, well, if it's based on an old classic by this author, Jane Austen, it must be secretly clever. And it reminds me of a video somebody made defending the Star Wars prequels, and their entire argument is 100% based on how the Star Wars prequels are filled with loads of allusions to old classic films. It's like, literally like this scene is intended to parallel Citizen Kane, and this scene's intended to parallel Casablanca, and I go through it, and to be honest, it's probably true. Like, I imagine George Lucas is a bit of a cinephile, and maybe he genuinely was like, you know what, I'm going to have a film where, it's going to parallel all these really great classic movies. But that doesn't make the film clever or particularly good, and that's kind of how I feel here, where you just making a film and then having it parallel a classic novel doesn't make the film clever.
I agree, Michael. I agree, and I looked at the critical reception for this movie, and apparently critics loved it, and it was, I think the phrase was, the darling of the summer of 1995, in terms of movies, obviously. And I'm just like, that's gotta be because it was an adaptation of Emma. And all these critics read Emma, or know about it, and are like, oh, how lovely. The classics are making a comeback, or something like that. That was their point. Because this movie, just because it's based off a very popular book or a classic book that was written, 180 years prior to this movie, it doesn't mean that it's clever, as she puts it. But anyway, I just want to read this review that I saw on Google from Betsy Vandercook, just a random person who wrote a review on Google reviewing Clueless. I initially thought her name was Betsy Vandercock, and I thought that would be a hilarious name, but it was Vandercook. So, that was disappointing. But anyway, so she has read Emma, and she wants to give her opinion on whether this movie can stack up to Emma. And so she says,
okay, this is useful.
Yeah, I just read Jane Austen's Emma and saw a local play adaptation and wanted to see how the movie compared. I had always heard it was totally fun. It surprisingly did. From the new girl coming to town, to the setup with Elton, Mr. Elton in the book, and even details like Cher's widowed father. Stuff was added, like the two teachers, and Wallace Shawn is so funny, and also one of the characters being gay, which, didn't make it into the Jane Austen novel. Yes, like we said, unsurprisingly there. I found it delightful, even almost 25 years after it was filmed. Emma the book holds up pretty well, though. Both are worth the time. So I guess, and going through Wikipedia, I skimmed through it, it does look like, basically the plot elements are pretty similar. So it's a good adaptation, I guess we can say that. We can give it a tick in terms of adapting. It's good. People who have read the novel and watched the movie, relatively close by, or seen a play about it anyway, look at it and are like, it's a good adaptation. So there you go. That is something that I guess we have to, if you're basing it off Emma, is it a good adaptation? And apparently it is. So anything to say on that?
No, yeah. I mean, I think the only thing is that, obviously, it doesn't make it impressive, which I already said. And anyone can, especially if we're just talking about parallels, and I guess parallels quite a few things, but ultimately, you could it kind of is one of those things. It's a bit like I think we mentioned this, the one shot thing, where it's like you can take a completely mediocre film and then be like, okay, but get this, we're not going to cut the camera, and suddenly it's like, wow, it's a masterpiece. That's kind of how I feel about this. It's kind of like you can be like, okay, I've got a completely mediocre idea for a film, but get this. All the characters, they're going to parallel these characters in this old film, and it's like, oh wow, suddenly it's a masterpiece. It kind of feels like one of those things where it's a bit gimmicky, and I genuinely would be curious to know.
Well, I'm not sure if it's gimmicky.
I wonder which order it went in, but yeah, I do think, and that's the thing. It would be one thing I will say is that I do think maybe it's true that there are some films that present themselves as kind of costume dramas, like Little Women being the recent one, where not that much happens. And it kind of is functionally similar to this film. And I think I would probably tolerate those films more because it makes more sense in the context of those films to be like, well, that's it. It feels like it works to have these films set in the 18th century or whatever, where women just kind of go through their lives and live their lives. Because I think there's something inherently dramatic about women's lives in the 18th century. Whereas when it's just a high school drama and it's just like not much happening or not much direction, kind of just a series of events, that's when it gets more disappointing. Well, and actually, one other thing, by the way, because you said it's good as an adaptation, I would possibly quibble on that on one point. Because I think what makes something a good adaptation is not necessarily how faithful it is, but how well it adapts that into being an entertaining story in a film format. Because I think it's also probably true.
Well, maybe it did the best job it could. Like, I don't know.
I am wondering though, because obviously the thing is, in a book, you can kind of get away with having more crap because people, there's more in there. So you can kind of you can have a whole chapter where like they just go to a party and then nothing happens. That's what they do in books. It's what happens in the original Harry Potter book. But then when you're adapting it, like, well, we're going to get rid of that. So I don't know. Maybe, who knows? But overall, I'd say it's about what's in the movie. And what's in the movie, in my opinion, isn't that great?
Yeah. No, I'm not going to count how good it is adapting Emma into my overall rating, I guess, at the end.
Yeah.
But it is, if you're trying to make an adaptation, I guess you want to try and do it as best as possible, I guess, if that's one of your goals as a director, writer of the movie. Anyway, you used the word before, which was direction. And to say this movie doesn't have direction, that's what the context you used it in, and I have to agree with that, because here's the issue.
Yes.
This movie just goes all over the place, and it's very hard to get a stranglehold of a narrative, and that's what you kind of want to do when you're watching a movie, is you want to be like, oh, I know where this movie is taking me, I know what's actually happening, I know the thrust of what's going on. But again, it just seems like every 15 minutes in this movie, we flip to a new storyline, and we are all over the place. And again, if you're watching it back and you really like the movie and you like all these scenes, and you just like the concepts, I guess, then it's okay. It doesn't really matter. There's no direction, but that's not me. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, the first 15 minutes is about Cher getting two of her teachers together, and then all of a sudden this new girl comes in who's Ty, obviously, and she has to make her project. There is little motivation given as to why she's doing this. She's just selfish. That's pretty, clear in the first 20 minutes of the movie. And what she is doing, helping Ty, doesn't appear to be anything. She's not really doing it to further her own goals or to do something to help her. It's just she wants to do it because she likes doing makeovers. So I don't really get that. They could have surely put some motivation in there. And
absolutely.
There just doesn't appear to be a coherent structure to things. And I'm not saying all movies have to have a coherent structure. And and you could say, well, it's adapting Emma into a modern day setting. So obviously it's not going to be that well structured to some degree. But it still doesn't make the movie. I'm still not going to criticize the movie because of that. So what do you have to say on that, Michael?
No, I mean, it's funny you mentioned not knowing where you are in the film, I think, at one point, because originally, as I was watching this, I decided after I started getting really confused about where this was going, I realized I hadn't looked at how far we were into the film. I was into the film, and I was thinking like, should I, I'll check. And I was like, no, actually, I'm not going to check, because I want to just see what the experience of this film is like, having no idea how close you are to the end. And the short answer is, it's just insane, because you have no idea what's going on at all, because it's just like it's not really building up to an obvious ending. I mean, obviously when it reaches kind of in the last 5 minutes, you can tell it's winding down, but up until that point there's no acts or anything. I wanted to talk about the experience, because at first it's so weird, the way it was structured in the beginning was very strange to me, because she gives a terrible performance in this debate class, says nothing, and then she gets a C. And I'm like, okay, she gets a C. I'm confused by that. And then also she's horrified at the prospect of getting a C. And that's very confusing to me, because I've got C's, and I wasn't that bad. I got a C in my geography A level. And I was like, that's fine. It didn't really bother me. And yet she's she has to get, which is very weird, because the logical thing would be she's failing debate class, and she has to pass debate class by, learning to work hard. But instead it's just she gets a C, and rather than it being and it's very difficult to, immediately I'm thinking, I can't relate to this. She shouldn't have got this grade anyway, because it's a far better grade, so I don't get that. I think the issue is that it's symptomatic of something which happens, and I'm not going to kind of go into as much detail in time, but the romance element, I was like, oh, this romance, he's where they're trying to get the T-Rex from Toy Story together with the woman, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cute. But then obviously that just, it gets abandoned, and it's so weird, and that was kind of my experience.
Yeah, you never see them again until the end where they have their wedding. But the thing is,
it's a very strange situation.
Yeah, the thing is, with the grade getting a C in debating class, I think that what the movie is trying to say is that is her privilege, I guess. It's the whole idea that she got a C from that, and she is crying because she didn't get a C and wants to get an A, is emblematic of the privilege that she has. that she can do really shit and still demand to get like the highest grades,
Yeah.
even when she doesn't actually get the grade that she deserves. So that's what I'd say to that. I wouldn't really criticize that bit, to be honest.
Yeah, no, yeah, I do kind of get it, and I feel like it does make sense, but I also feel like, I think the issue is that if they were going to do that, I feel like they should have kind of stuck with that as a plot point in order to kind of really flesh out the idea, rather than, it's kind of like, I guess the issue is, it's like it's introduced as a plot point to establish this thing about her character, but then it's abandoned as a plot point as her character continues to progress. And obviously the logical thing to do would be to keep it as kind of a thing. And like, genuinely, because when I was watching this at first, my assumption was that the film was going to be about her learning to be a debate. I thought it was going to be like, the same way in Legally Blonde she learns to be a lawyer. It's like, oh, she's got to pass debate club, and that's going to be the main thing, and she's going to talk to some guy and learn, which is, it's fine, it didn't do that. But I was like, and basically the point being that there were so many times where like a plot was appearing, and then I was just like, towards the end, I was just like, okay, I don't know if this is going to mean much. Also, she gets robbed out of nowhere. Can we talk about that? What do you think about that, Luke? Do you think that was normal?
Well, let's talk about what happens before that, because here's the thing. This is where, I was already complaining about the lack of direction, and then we have another, it's probably like half an hour, 35 minutes into the movie, where we have another situation where this boy, Elton, is all of a sudden this love interest, and he literally comes out of nowhere. We see him in this photo shoot that Cher and Ty are having, and all of a sudden he's the main character in this movie. Well, I thought he would be, but he's only in there for like 20 minutes, just like that. I mean, just introduce him beforehand or something, please, And then he moves out of the way, and in comes another guy who Cher is into now. And, her motivation has changed, and we're off in a completely new direction after that, it seems. And obviously he turns out he's gay, so that's the end of that, and we never see that character again, it appears.
Yeah.
It's that is the case with this movie, and we can go through it, analyze.
And there's the whole thing where Ty becomes like more popular than her, and it's just like
that's the next 15-minute segment.
Yes, and it's just it's so weird how it's set up like that. It's not like there's no, and you just think about, you compare it to other films that are like teen comedies or kind of high school dramas, and there's like, it's usually about this particular thing, and this time it's just like, oh yeah, she starts helping this Thai girl for no reason, and then it's weird calling her a Thai girl because it implies that she's from Thailand, and then she gets angry because the woman's like more popular than her, and that doesn't really get followed up either. Like it's kind of, you could take any scene from this film and like you'd show it to somebody and they would be like, oh yeah, I know what this plot's going to be about. Like, you show somebody that scene where she's like, oh, I can't believe Ty's more popular than me, and it'll be like, okay, it's about a woman coming to terms, this film's about a woman, or a girl, I guess, coming to terms with the fact that her best friend is becoming more popular than her, and how's she going to deal with it? And then you go, nope, turns out you could show
they're fine 5 minutes later on.
Yeah, exactly. For every single scene in this film, there is a plot for a film that would logically go along with it, and yet none of them would be the same. And
on the Ty getting more popular than her thing, she gets more popular than Cher because two boys decide to tip Ty over the banister of a mall. Like, apparently that's what you do in Beverly Hills in the 1990s. That's just something that just happened.
That was so weird.
I mean, I'm sure something happened in the book that,
I imagine, I don't know, maybe she fell off her horse.
Yeah.
I assume that's just how anyone gets her. That's the only way women can get her in the before the 1900s. They just got to fall off their horse.
Yes, fallen off her horse or something, or off a carriage or something like that. And that can't maybe be easily translated into modern day America. So let's just hang her off a banister at a mall. And apparently everybody in school is interested in this story. Like,
that's funny.
How crazy. Not just like, well, that's just really weird. What the fuck? Like, that would be
exactly. Like, imagine, like, here's the thing, okay. When, like, if there's a girl who's kind of unpopular in school, or a guy, it's usually because they're kind of the weird kid. So something very strange happens to them. That's not going to make them more popular. Like, when I think about, there was a girl in school
with
who's
somebody who has a reputation like Ty, you would imagine they'd be like, oh yeah, I bet she was trying to buy drugs or something. That would be people's first impressions.
Like, because when you just think about like just imagine any real life situation, but that's not how it would work out. They'd just be like, okay, cool, whatever. Yeah, so it makes no sense. And it's just so weird. Like, and again, logically, you'd be like, oh yeah, especially again if you take the two things together of like she helps Ty become popular by kind of making her up and stuff, but then Ty becomes popular for reasons completely unrelated to I've forgotten the name of the main character. What's she called? Amy?
Sure.
Because she's named after the... Ty becomes popular for reasons completely unrelated to any of Cher's actions or motivations, to use that word loosely. Which means that it kind of doesn't even feel like... It kind of makes it feel hollow. Like, nothing really feels like it matters or that it's real, because there isn't a meaningful sense of cause and effect. And yeah, it's just, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess her friends become popular for some reason. And there's no like logic to it of like, Cher makes Ty really popular, and then Ty turns around, kind of like a reverse Mean Girls thing where, it's Cher is the one who makes Ty popular, and then Ty...
It's a reverse Mean Girls thing,
becomes popular. And then, yes, I feel like it's really hard not to just mention Mean Girls all the time.
Yeah.
Because it's the only film we've seen.
Yeah. Yeah. But obviously, as you said, at the end of the movie, it's pretty clear when the movie's winding down. And we finally get, I guess, the conclusion to the journey that Cher's been on. So she realizes that she is in love with Josh. Obviously, that is the culmination to her like character arc, I guess. Josh confronts her obliviousness and her privilege, and that is basically why she ends up with him, I guess, because he's the one that makes her less clueless, I guess, is the message. Which I'll get onto more in a bit, talking about, the actual message that this movie is trying to portray and why it's called Clueless. But yeah, obviously you wanted to talk about the fact that Josh is actually her stepbrother, although I will preface that he is her former stepbrother. So maybe there's a bit of a difference there.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's strange. There's a specific reason why it's strange, and I think there's a context here, and it's why it bothers me more so, and it's because I think there is something inherently Freudian in a lot of family relationships. When you think about what is an ideal brother is someone who's like, they tease you a bit, they're kind of friendly with you, but ultimately they've kind of got your back, they'll protect you. And these are all also attributes I'd say women are naturally geared to think are just the best things in a man. And I would argue that really a good brother should be the best man that a woman could conceive of. That's my theory. Okay, now I'm going to walk these things back here. Paul Rudd in this film is the archetypal good brother. This is my issue. Because he's somebody who he teases her, he makes fun of her, he points out her foibles, he's kind of funny, but ultimately he's got her back, which I would say is the definitive good brother. And therefore it kind of bothers me, because obviously this is when we talked about the reality, which is that one, something being Freudian doesn't mean you literally consciously feel it. Like when we're talking about Freudian things, we're talking about, if you've got an Oedipus complex, it doesn't mean you literally want to bang your mum, it just means you've got some kind of weird psychological thing that's like internal and whatever. And the issue is, I do accept the fact that he is not really her brother. The only issue I have with it, that basically what I've already said, I think Paul Rudd is written to be such a kind of perfect brother and such a kind of typical brother character that it's very strange to me that she ends up in love with him. That regardless of the actual blood relationship between them, which obviously doesn't exist, he is written in such a brotherly way that it's very strange to me. And I think maybe it's because, like obviously I have a sister, I know what it's like to be a brother to a sister, and if I were to say like, how I act towards my sister, I would like to think that I act kind of like a Paul Rudd character. I make fun of her, I point out her issues, but ultimately we kind of get along and I'll always have her back, which is exactly how Paul Rudd is acting, and therefore it's very disturbing to me to see that be interpreted by the main character as, ooh, this is romantic chemistry.
Yeah, so you're very insecure about this now. You're walking around your house like with your hand in your mouth, like going, "Oh my god, am I attracted to my sister?"
No, that's the thing. I should point out, actually, there is another thing which I just want to say. I don't think it makes sense in reverse, because I think that's the weird thing. I don't believe that Paul Rudd would actually be attracted to Cher in this film. And I know, like, obviously there's other reasons, but I would say simply, if we just stick with the Freudian thing, I don't think it works in reverse. The way that works, I don't think brothers have any kind of thing going on, complexes. With brothers, it's all about the mum. We know this. It's the Oedipus complex. So if Paul Rudd banged his mum, I'd be like, okay, that makes sense. But yeah, I don't believe that he'd be attracted to this woman to whom he has adopted such a brotherly role. Like, I don't think you can go from kind of teasing somebody as like a brother to being like, yeah, I want to bang them. So I found the Paul Rudd aspect unbelievable. So I guess I'm just further removing myself to further add ammunition to your belief that I'm insecure. So
okay, well, look. I mean, fact of the matter is that America is a different place. It's a different country, and as we know, there's quite a few. I'll just say porn scenarios. I guess that's the best way to describe it, with like step siblings, which. Apparently it's really popular, and many I've listened to podcasts and they pointed out how weird it is, and they're American, so maybe I'm being too harsh on calling this like being in a relationship with your step sibling is a American phenomenon. But I have to. That's what I thought when they were getting together. I was like, oh, this is why Americans are so obsessed with that type of porn scenario. I was thinking it all started with this movie. It all started with this movie, Michael.
No, yeah, it is. It's genuinely like, to me, it comes across as like, especially when they actually, I thought, okay, this was going to be, and this is the weird thing, okay, And this is why I said there was a distinction between one, having like the kind of Freudian subconscious thing and actively acknowledging it, and then two, the difference between actively acknowledging it and actually acting on it. Because when she was like, oh man, I love my brother, I was like, okay, like fair enough. Okay, it's a bit weird, but to be honest, I can accept the fact that a woman might realize that this person who acts in this particular way towards her, a way that's kind of very, like I say, like a brother, which is, as I think is genuinely how women are inclined to see like the perfect man, would be like somebody who teases them, he's got a sense of humor, but ultimately he's got their back. And I can understand why she'd be like, oh, I love him. And then she'd be like, oh, okay, maybe that would just be some kind of learning moment where she'd be like, okay, so that's the kind of guy I should be going for. Someone who's, more like Paul Rudd, somebody who's more like, intelligent, who's willing to kind of put me in my place, who's willing to kind of, that sounds a bit like anti-feminist, but, like kind of rein me in a bit. Yeah. Like I want someone like that. And therefore I thought that was going to be it. I thought she was going to kind of, go to see and be like, oh, what, you're a really good guy, Paul. And that was it. Like we basically learned like, okay. Sorry, not Paul. I can't remember what
Josh.
Is the, Josh. Yeah. So it's like, you're a really good guy, Josh. And then, that would be with like, okay, so she's learned to respect her brother. She's learned that he's kind of, the fact that he's intelligent isn't something to be made fun of. The fact that he's interested in learning about things isn't something to be mocked. That she should kind of try and be like, and then they kiss. And I was just like, okay, that's a bit weird to me, but it's fine.
Yeah, look,
whatever.
You know what? Americans have a different perspective. Shall we say? Again, maybe I'm being a bit too harsh there, but I did think it was weird actually when Josh kissed Cher, and then Cher said, "No, wait, Josh, I'm your sister." And then Josh goes, "No, silly, you're my stepsister." Emphasize the step.
Oh dear, it's like my ex-stepsister.
Oh yeah, it's like you're not even my step, you're my ex-stepsister. So this is A-okay.
I'd just be like, I mean, it would make slightly. See, the thing is, the only issue.
I actually saw on Google when I typed in Clueless. I saw one of the first questions because Google sometimes has these questions when when you type in something, and one of the questions was, are Josh and Cher related? I think that was the first question, actually. Yeah, it was the first question. Are Josh and Cher related? So clearly this is not something that we are concerned about. Maybe it's too strong a word, but curious about. Maybe other people are just like, wait, are they? Yeah. Should they be doing that? This thing, I did not expect. I mean, you talked a bit about it, but I'll just say I did not expect them to get together at the end of the movie. I just thought they were like brother and sister. Like, it did seem a weird direction turn.
Yeah, I think
it
makes
sense in terms of the message the movie's trying to portray, but it does seem quite weird. In Emma, by the way, the Josh character is Emma's brother-in-law.
Okay, see, that makes a lot more sense. Because I was going to say, like, the issue is, and I think this is what needs to be restated, is that the way that Josh is written in this film is very brotherly, and I think that's the main concern. Like the fact that if you were writing, like, if they were brothers and sister, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. That completely makes sense with the way they're written up until they, kiss. Because, like, literally, that's exactly how they play with each other. If that sounded wrong. That's exactly how they interact with each other. That it's like a brotherly, sisterly kind of sibling rivalry thing. And because of that, that's why it's so weird. It's not really to do with their actual relationship in terms of blood. It's to do with the fact that he's written exactly like you would expect a brother to be written. It's very strange.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. And I think it's a good point, which, as obviously I don't have a sister, so that's not something that I...
Did you ever want to fuck your brother? Did you ever want to kiss your brother?
What a question to ask. So that is, I guess, that the Freudian aspect of this movie, which when I started watching the movie for the first time, I didn't expect, that we'd be talking about that, but there you go.
Yeah, that was insane.
Yeah, but anyway, I think we should get onto the actual message, which I've referenced a couple of times. It's about, Cher dismissing her privilege and Josh allowing her to do that. And obviously the movie is called Clueless, so the movie is generally about people who are in this age bracket who think they know everything and are actually clueless. That's why it's kind of a coming of age story as well. That's what it's actually titled in the Wikipedia page. People this age, they don't really know what they want. That's the point, I guess. And you could say, well, there's nothing more to it than that. But like I said, it's also about Cher trying to be a better person. Obviously, at the end, she raises money for this beach disaster in California, which, by the way, I didn't think happened. They made it up. So there's like, well, she hasn't really changed that much. I guess she'll always be in this bubble. Maybe that's another message. But anyway, the movie tries to encourage Cher not to focus on the trappings, I guess, in her life. Like, she's clueless because of how little she cares about the world and how she just loves fashion and shopping. She's in this privileged bubble. Her view of the world is at odds with, how the world actually is. But that's the ironic thing about this movie, because why are people so obsessed with this movie? Why is it a cult classic? Because people like the shopping and the fashion, and they like, looking at her clothes, and they like this bubble that Cher's in, and Cher could be said to be kind of aspirational for like high school students who are like, I want to be like Cher. The actual message of the movie is, no, you actually don't want to be like Cher. You shouldn't want to be like Cher. You should want to be like Cher, well, kind of like the Cher at the end of the movie compared to the one at the start. That's what, when people think of this movie, and I'm looking right now at I typed in Clueless, and there's a BBC article that says like why Clueless changed the movie makeover. For instance, that was the title of the article, and it seems that people really are obsessed with the vacancy, I guess, of this movie, the style of this movie, rather than the actual message, which again I just find very, very ironic, to be honest. That's why it's a cult movie, but the message of the movie kind of is, well, this should not be a cult movie. This should not be something that teenage girls across America want to aspire to be. They should not want to be like Cher, but that's, I guess, when you create art, you can't know what consequences it may have and what people will take from it. Yeah, exactly. So what do you think about that, Michael?
No, I think pretty much. I mean, the issue is, of course, I don't think the film necessarily has a 100% clear idea of, well, I think it maybe has a clear idea of what it's trying to say. I don't think it necessarily does a great job at communicating that, because Cher isn't that well defined based on that we don't really see, they say characters is, I don't know, I can't remember what it is. Characters is something plus action. I always forget what it is. But it's like that, that's what characters are. And obviously in this case, because there's no real clear continuity or real character arc, because just loads of random stuff happens, it's kind of hard to really get a clear message of who Cher is and who she's supposed to become, apart from just she's, very superficial, and she needs to become more nice to people who are interested in things beyond superficial things, which is strange in a way. Like, there are a lot of weird things about, like, she mentions Hamlet, and the, I guess, thing is that she's seen the film Hamlet, but it's weird to me because, like, a superficial, vacuous woman or man, I don't think would have seen Hamlet at all. It really seemed weird to me that, like, it was set up as, she hasn't even read the play Hamlet. But it's like, well, who would read a play? Obviously, the only way you're going to see a play is either see it acted out in a theatre or see it recreated in a film. So that was and it's just, I bring that up just because it's like a weird example that shows me how, like, the idea that she's obviously superficial or something like that just seems kind of weird to me, because it's like, well, there's lots of things about her that are quite interesting, and it seems that she actually does have a lot of personality. She's watching Shakespeare plays in her free time. Well, that's, more interesting than what somebody like in Mean Girls would be doing. So it's curious to me that they kind of, I don't necessarily know how much I buy that she's like, oh look, she's just terrible and superficial and fake, and she needs to become.
That's the
real.
word I was looking for. That's the fucking word. You got it now, but you didn't get it before. I was looking for the word superficial. That is exactly. Yeah, that is exactly what. I guess this movie is trying to say. You shouldn't be superficial based on what she does at the end. But I guess, what are you saying throughout the movie? She isn't that actually superficial, because I definitely think that she is.
See, well, that's the thing. Okay, the issue is, I don't know.
There's bits and pieces that show she isn't, because she helps her dad and so on. But like, that is the path that she is going down, and maybe that's the thing. Like, that's the path that she's convinced she has to go down. But in actual fact, she's actually not like that. Maybe that's the best interpretation.
Yeah, basically. I mean, it's weird because it kind of feels like she's quite self-entitled, but I wouldn't necessarily say that she's that. I would say there's a lot to her in that. You look at, for example, I mean, she's like, hey, I don't want to lose my virginity until, like, which I'm not obviously saying is a virtue in itself. I'm saying it shows that somebody has a clear kind of sense of what they want. That they're like, she's like, hey, I could lose my virginity because that's what everyone else is doing, but I'm going to choose not to do that because I want to wait until I'm in a relationship with somebody I love, which suggests that there is something she's got.
That's kind of like a status thing, though.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, maybe you're right. Yeah, it's just
as that.
Yeah,
like,
actually, I never.
I don't want to lower myself. That kind of attitude. It seems that she has.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like. Yeah, I mean that's how I would see it. But anyway, so that's. I just wanted to point out the irony in the media.
I can agree with that too. There's loads of people who I could see being like, yeah, I want to be like her. Whereas,
well, the reason why it's a cult classic is because of the, I use that word, the superficial aspects. That is the reason why. And the irony is not lost that the media is trying to say, no, she shouldn't be interested in the superficial aspects. She should be, helping people who've been involved in like disasters, who have lost all their belongings, and she should get outside her privileged bubble and, actually confront her superficial ways. So yeah.
I do have one question, and I'm trying to think if I can think about this with regards to the film, and you'll probably be able to help me out. In what way does the film show how her being superficial disadvantages her? This might sound weird, and maybe I'm like completely missing something.
It's not that it disadvantages her. It's just that she's, I guess, not happy with it. Yeah. She's not happy with the path she's taken.
It's just kind of interesting because I guess
she ends up in a place where she's not happy.
Yeah, it kind of feels weird because I feel like this film is missing a clearly defined second act because there's not like there aren't that many moments I can think where I'm like, oh yeah,
she loses. She doesn't get to drive. She doesn't get her driving license, and that's a big downer for her. And that's maybe she can't bargain her way out of it. She can't convince anyone. So that's maybe like her being confronted, like, oh, I can't. Yeah, I can't go back to my old ways. I was successful with the teachers, but now in the real world, when you get outside like the school bubble, I guess that she's in the real world, that those tactics don't work. So maybe that's how it disadvantages her.
Although I could point out that if we wanted to be a bit cynical, we could point out that if anything, it's more like that in the real world. I think it's probably that's kind of the ironic thing.
Sure.
I would say it's probably, I know that's not what the film's about, but I would say it's probably easier to blag. That's a term, isn't it? Your way through life than it is to do so through school. Like basically, which I know obviously isn't what it's about, but it is a funny thing I was thinking about. Like it's probably much easier to like get a job by being charismatic than it is to. But yeah, I'm just
especially today. I think
in this hell world we live in.
Yes, exactly. The only people that get by are the people who are privileged, as we could see, especially yesterday with the A-level results in the UK, in which private schools got their grades bumped right up, and everyone else, particularly areas where a lot of students are poor, got their grades bumped right down because the algorithm was based on classroom size, and obviously people who are in classrooms with a lot of people, they're going to probably be poorer. And therefore, they can't be that smart, so their grades get bumped down, which is just a fucking crazy and dystopian way to look at things.
It's so. It feels like, I don't know. I felt like someone. I wish we still had Orwell. Imagine what do you do with this?
But yeah, there is I know there is a trope in movies like, there's this privileged person and she doesn't know, or he doesn't know what it's like in the real world, and that's what this plays on. But I guess you could say, overall, well, that's not actually the case. That's, I guess, the irony of it, and especially, like I said, today that's probably the case. But maybe, I don't know, back in the 90s, things seem more meritocratic, right? Things seem more like that. I mean, at least that's what...
Yeah, well, America did win the Cold War because they deserved it.
Exactly, yeah. But anyway, I just want to say a quick thing on Mean Girls before we move on to the comedy.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because here's the thing, I don't know if I'm regretting keeping the amount of praise I heaped on Mean Girls for being original, because that's what I remember what I said about it. It was like one of the first... high school movies that centered on girls, that was a comedy, and that's why it was such a cult classic and beloved. And this movie, Clueless, came out 9 years before Mean Girls, and yes, it does have a different structure and a point, I guess, but it does seem, you could argue, like, Mean Girls was just Clueless, but from the perspective of the kid that gets a makeover and becomes popular. And I know you mentioned it before, it's like the reverse Mean Girls, but
of course, in chronological order.
Yeah, there's this line where Cher says, the fact that you hang with D&I, she's saying it to Ty, the fact that you hang with D&I speaks very highly of you. And that's kind of exactly the same thing that Rachel McAdams would say in Mean Girls to, I've forgotten her name. What's she called, Michael?
Caddy.
Oh, right. You meant her actual character name.
Sorry, Lindsay Lohan.
Lindsay Lohan. Wow,
I was thinking...
That's good memory there. But yeah,
I know, to be fair, it's because I don't know if she's actually called Caddy. I think she's actually called Katie.
Yeah, that's it. I think Katie.
People keep calling her Caddy, or it might be the other way around. I don't know. Yeah, anyway, it doesn't matter. Lindsay Lohan.
Yeah. So do you regret praising Mean Girls as much? Because, like you said, you hadn't seen this movie until I said, let's watch it. And neither had I. I just heard that it's been its 25-year anniversary, so let's go and watch it, because apparently a lot of people on Twitter liked it a lot because it's a cult classic. So I was like, yeah, let's do it.
You know what? Basically, I think there are other things. I think Mean Girls had a clearer idea of what it wanted to do, which I appreciate more. I think Mean Girls overall is still a better film. I don't know if I I can't remember whether or not I really praised Mean Girls for being original in terms of being a female-centered comedy of kind of this nature. And overall, obviously, I think it wasn't. And this film kind of does show that there was those seeds that Mean Girls was standing on the shoulders of giants, I guess. I'm not entirely come to that euphemism because I wouldn't call this film a giant. But yeah, overall, I would say certainly that if your main argument is, well, Mean Girls is original, well, then probably this film does discredit that quite a lot, because this film does feel like, you can probably see the past echoes of Mean Girls, the things that were leading up to Mean Girls. But what I will say, as a perfect segue, is that one thing I do like about Mean Girls is I found Mean Girls much more authentically funny, and much more memeable, quotable, enjoyable, and just, I liked Mean Girls a lot more. I found it much funnier. So
yeah, okay, well, we'll talk
what
about
this
comedy
film
now,
though, Luke?
Yeah.
Do you think this film was funny?
I mean, look, here's the thing, it's got a different style to Mean Girls, obviously. Throughout the movie, they're all talking in this insincere style, which differs from Mean Girls. And the thing is, in this movie, it's kind of mocking the bubble that the main character is in, and it's mocking Cher right from the get-go. And it doesn't mock Lindsay Lohan in the same way. So it's not the same as Mean Girls.
It's more self-depreciating in this film.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas Mean Girls is more like making fun of the world.
Mm-hmm, yeah, and that's the difference, I guess. And
do you know why, Luke? Okay, you ready for this analysis right here?
Why?
You're gonna love this. No, actually, okay, I'm gonna end on this point actually, because I think I like that. But I will say, so first of all, there was one joke I thought was like, I don't know how funny I really thought it was, but I did appreciate it as a joke, which was when she says, "My dad's a lawyer. He gets paid $500 an hour to fight with people. He fights with me for free because I'm his daughter." I thought that was a funny line. I didn't laugh. But apart from that, I found the issue is that immediately the first thing that happens, she says, "I choose my clothes in a normal way, just like you." And then she literally uses a computer program to pick her clothes. It's literally the latest joke made. This is how you do it, okay? What you do is you say something and then you show the exact opposite. And it's like, anytime a comedy does that, I immediately just get really annoyed, because it's the easiest joke to do. You can just be like, "My dad always respects me." And then your dad walks in and goes, "Sup, fuckface." And that's it. That's the joke. Literally, it's the easiest joke to write in the world. You just say, make the character say a thing and then show the opposite thing, and that's the joke. And it really annoys me. Kind of a bit stupid. So honestly, the humour for me, I agree with you, it's different from Mean Girls, but overall, I would say it felt more, I think satire is an easy comedy to do badly, because it's a very easy comedy to do lazily. Like, your satire can just be as simple as, there's this thing called the Babylon Bee, and they're conservative satire, and their satire is the laziest type satire. Literally, they had this one article and it's like, "Beyonce is a role model for women, says confused woman," and literally the entire joke of the article was just, you'd say something and then be like, "This woman must be stupid," and that was their satire, and it's just the stupidest thing, and that's kind of how I felt about this film.
But, I mean, it's not as bad as conservative satire, but it is. It's not great, I guess. I mean, there is one. I did like the line, "It doesn't say RSVP on the Statue of Liberty." I thought
that was good.
I thought that was okay. And there are a few other funny lines, about 3 or 4, I'd say, throughout the movie.
But I wouldn't say this film is as quotable as
No. Mean Girls. That's probably why it hasn't, been. Well, I think even though it is still a cult classic, it's not as highly regarded as Mean Girls, probably because of that.
Yeah.
And I think,
stop making Clueless happen, Luke. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. The Israeli Defense Forces didn't quote any line from Clueless, but nothing major in the second half of the movie happens in terms of comedy. There's no, I say nothing major. It's just there's nothing really there, and that's kind of like Mean Girls, I guess. The comedy drops quite a bit in the second half, but I think the first half of Mean Girls is stronger, and I guess that is the difference, really, the quotable lines. And I did like the bit, actually. I will say this was a nice subtle joke, I guess, when she's talking, Cher is, to the PE teacher about how all men are awful to get her grade up, and obviously the implication is it's not very, it's not in your face. The implication is the PE teacher is, a lesbian, so she'd be like, "Oh yeah, all men are awful. Yeah, of course. But then they kind of ruin it 2 minutes later when she says she is probably, same-sex oriented, when they're trying to find a teacher for the fucking potato. The dinosaur.
I will say the scene of, I know we've already gone past Mean Girls, but the scene of her explaining all the different groups of people, the different cliques.
Yeah.
Remember that? That reminded me a lot of Mean Girls.
Yeah, they go into bigger detail in Mean Girls.
Again. Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, Mean Girls just builds on it more. But I do have I have a reason why I think that the comedy is different in this film to in Mean Girls, and it's that in Mean Girls, we've already said that the joke is kind of on society. So Lindsay Lohan is a more reasonable person who's not really made fun of, but the society she lives in is made fun of. And I think that's because in Bush America, comedians and culture in general was beginning to, especially the counterculture, was beginning to come to terms with the fact that America was kind of shit because George Bush was kind of shit and America was doing some kind of shitty things at that point in their life. Whereas in the 1990s, there was kind of this idea of, it was, I don't want to say peak neoliberal individualism because I think we're kind of at that point at the moment, but peak kind of neoliberal individualism where even progressives were fully on, well, yeah, I'll say progressives, like even like the mainstream kind of Hollywood culture was completely on board with this thing. And I think that's evidenced by the fact that the argument is, there's nothing wrong with society, because this film doesn't critique society. It just says, this woman is just superficial and terrible, and she needs to learn her lesson. And I think that's much more emblematic of the culture of the 1990s.
No, I agree. Yeah, in the 90s, it definitely was. I mean, you say peak neoliberalism now, but in terms of it being a cultural force, that was the case in the 1990s. And so therefore, if you're, mocking individuals in a society and the bubble that they live in, rather than society and the problems that society has as a whole, it makes more sense. And I guess that's why probably maybe the comedy Mean Girls is better, because, mocking society is not, it's I mean, I don't want to say it's lazy to just mock a overprivileged individual like this movie does to share, but, it's definitely easier than
definitely
doing something that takes apart of society. So, look at this character, look at this, bubble that they live in. Isn't everything ridiculous? It's, it can make for some funny lines, I guess, but overall it's just not that funny, I guess. And maybe at the time it was groundbreaking because, nothing had been done like this before. And if you actually think about it, what has happened since then, which we'll get onto in the legacy, kind of makes it seem like, maybe this, it was mocking these individuals, and to us, this doesn't seem that revolutionary, but maybe it was revolutionary at the time. Or maybe revolutionary is too strong a word, but it was, original at the time. And that counts for something, I guess. Because, shall I move on to the legacy now, Michael? Have you got something else to say in the comedy?
No, that's fine. Legacy. Yeah. Let's do it.
So the film was well known for the characters' catchphrases and vocabulary. Cher's verbal style is also marked by ironic contrasts between current slang and historical references, such as where she compares Tide to those Botticelli chicks. Fashion trends influenced by Clueless include Donatella Versace's 2018 collection, which again is the most ironic thing considering the message of the movie is she shouldn't be as superficial. But that's what people take from it, I guess, and you can't help that. Clueless was the main inspiration for Australian rapper Iggy Azalea's music video for her 2014 song Fancy.
Yes.
Remember that?
Yes,
I'm
I do.
so fancy.
You already know. That's how you get a copyright strike.
Singing about how she is just the most stylish person. She's in the fast lane. She's so good. Again, ironic considering the
first
message.
Things first, I'm the most superficial.
Yeah, she is the most superficial. Oh, God. So many visuals and costumes inspired by the film were used in the Fancy music video, which is filled with remakes of Clueless scenes. The outfits are also reinvented to channel the famous stylings of the film with a slightly modern edge. Yes, the famous stylings of the film. Fancy was shot in the same Los Angeles school where Clueless was filmed, by the way. And so, here's the thing, that's what people have taken from this. And, I'm not going to use the word ironic again. I'm going to ban myself from using it, okay? But, it's clearly, this is not, I guess, what was intended by the movie as a satire. Like, people looked at this privileged person in shirt, I'm like, no, I want to be like her. And I guess, if you look at what happened after this movie, with the likes of Paris Hilton becoming a phenomenon. Remember her, Michael? Paris Hilton? In the early 2000s?
Exactly,
The queen of reality TV, I guess, before the Kardashians. Obviously, the Kardashians happened after that, and, they're people who live in Los Angeles, probably Beverly Hills or around that area, who are very wealthy, don't really, know what it's like in the quote-unquote real world, and people are fascinated by them. Obviously, Paris Hilton was incredibly famous for just doing nothing, and kind of the same with Kim Kardashian, although she did make a sex tape, so that's what propelled her to fame. But I mean, here's the thing. I said before, this character seems original, and this kind of movie seems original, and because it probably was the first to actually go after this specific genre of character, which, has become kind of a mainstream thing in the culture after that, after this movie. But this character now, it just seems so kind of boring, because I'm like, I've seen this before. I've seen this character. I know what this character is. I mean, Rachel McAdams in Mean Girls is kind of like this character. Not really, but kind of. And yeah, it just seems to me like this movie doesn't age that well looking back on it, because it's like, oh yeah, this character's been done to death now. And I know it was the first, I know it can't help that, but I'm just like, well, look at Paris Hilton, look at the Kardashians. Like, yeah, everybody mocks this kind of character. Everybody knows about this character. So yeah, I guess because of how successful the character of Cher was, and how ditzy she was, and how oblivious she was, and that has translated to people being obsessed with people like Paris Hilton after. So yeah, what do you make of that, Michael?
No, yeah, I think you're pretty much right. Basically, there are these characters. I think it's I will say I think it's interesting in that contextually, you could say that there have always been women who have been like this, who have kind of not really valued their own intellectual pursuits and things like that, but rather just wanted to court the fancies of finer society. But I think the difference is, I think this is what
just
makes
like
sense, because I'm thinking about
I don't know.
yes, Emma.
I haven't read the book, so
and I'm also thinking about like some. See, you mentioned this very original. I was thinking like I'm sure there's some women in the old Greece who are a bit like this, but I think what's distinct about this film and distinct about this kind of idea is the 1990s was at a point where being like this began to be recontextualized much more as a lifestyle choice, as opposed to prior to this point where in the immediate decades preceding this, it was understood as a facet of female oppression. Whereas at this point, it was when it became a choice. And I think that's kind of what makes this a different character. The idea of like, she's like this, not because she's forced to be like this, but because she's choosing to be like this. And that's still being criticized, which I guess is a good thing. But overall, I think the issue is that the culture around the time was not really a culture that was equipped to criticize a person like this. Because ultimately, I think the culture, one, it's about kind of being fun. It's about going with the flow. It's about like not letting people be judged for their own individual actions and things like that. And overall, I think that's why, you can't have a character like this and criticize them and expect people to go with that, because the culture then is like, oh, it's just, it's about being fun. It's about having fun. Hey, we won the Cold War, everything's fine. It's all going to be really prosperous now and don't have to worry about anything. And therefore, I feel like this kind of critique just couldn't be as hard hitting. I feel like if this film was made in the 80s, then everyone would be like, oh yeah, man, 80s is shit. But, especially in hindsight, because now we will understand the 80s is shit. I feel like the problem is we're in love with the 90s, and I feel like basically until we stop being in love with the 90s, we're going to keep getting characters like Miss Cher here.
Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons why, I guess, this character did blow up in the 90s, and the 90s is a decade which people like, certainly more than the 80s, and, I think there was something nice to me about seeing all this 90s stuff. Like, I know you criticised it in terms of the comedy stuff, but I love
Pocahontas.
The dress me thing on the computer, and it's just a reminder that the world was just getting into computers, and people thought computers were going to do all this cool stuff, and I was just thinking, watching that, like, those were the days. And also you had like Beavis and Butthead, massive cell phones, the phrase haul ass and I dig it, or I dug it, Marky Mark, Cindy Crawford.
I did like it when he mentioned Marky Mark. That was funny to me.
Violence on TV, Ren and Stimpy, and the war in Bosnia. All of this 90s stuff, which, you know about. And
I love the war in Bosnia.
Yeah, it's fun to reminisce, isn't it, about the genocide that happened in 1995. Great stuff. No, but that's the thing. Like, that was the culture, and it seemed like you're looking back. You could look back at all these like things that happened in the world and happened in popular culture. We're like, oh yeah, this is such a 90s movie, and that, I guess, is part of the nostalgia. And maybe that's why people do like this movie and do forget the message, because it's like they want to get in. They want to get in, not just in this bubble, but in this specific world where in the mid-90s everything seemed fine. Like you said, everything seemed happy, everything seemed prosperous. And so that's a good point you made there.
Thank you. I'm full of them, Luke.
Yeah. So do you want to conclude now? Do you want to go first?
All right. Yeah, let's go first. So overall, I guess the thing I would take issue with is if someone said they liked this film, I'd want to know why. Because as I see it, there's really only two ways you can like it. And we'll start off with liking it as trying to understand the point of the film and just take the point of the film at face value. And I think for me, the issue there is that the film, it's not thematically dense. I would say it's probably more like thematically sparse. And to be honest, I don't think it's immediately obvious watching this film what Clueless means. I don't think the film does a good job of communicating that. I think especially within the context of actually watching the narrative unfold, because logically, you're like, oh, she gave a really shit debate performance. It's going to be, clueless. Why is she clueless? She's clueless because she's an idiot, because she doesn't really know how to debate. But instead, you find out, oh, actually, no, she's got some pretty good grades. And obviously, yeah, sure, she's like usually kind of sucking up a bit to get them. But overall, it seems like she's kind of actually a bit, worldly. And you kind of realize, like, okay, so she's clueless and that she doesn't really understand how ultimately vacuous this all is. And you're like, okay, fine. But the issue is, even once you've arrived at, okay, that's what it means by clueless, well, the film didn't really kind of help you get there. And I do think, that's an issue with the film, the way the film's structured. But if you like this film because you're like, oh, it's just dumb fun, well, I don't really get that either, because I didn't find this film very fun. I struggled to relate to any of the characters or find any of the characters interesting, because I don't think any of the characters really made that much sense or had that much to them. And also none of them, you didn't really get to like or know any of the characters because they all just showed up for their own little episodic adventures. And then obviously regarding the fact it's an adaptation of Emma, I don't really care, and I'm not going to let it factor into my opinion. So overall, I just say it kind of just is really disappointing. And I mean, I didn't hate it. You know what? Okay, I know where I'm going to put it. I'm going to put it above Jurassic World, which might seem like a weird one, but obviously I notoriously don't like Jurassic World, and I think Jurassic World kind of bothers me more. But I'm going to put it below Man of Steel, which it might sound a bit weird. You'd be like, oh man, Man of Steel, isn't Man of Steel pretty good? But overall, I would say Man of Steel, it has more, well, it's just more interesting to me. Like Man of Steel, I hate to say it, but I would genuinely rather watch Man of Steel than this. I mean, Man of Steel is the best of the Zack Snyder DC films, so you know what? Yeah, that's where it is. Which, by the way, is pretty much a middling 3. So a middling 3. I didn't really like it, and I thought there were some big structural issues, and also I found the incest weird, but I guess I'll say I'm letting them off for that.
Yeah, the incest is definitely a knock against this movie. Yeah, I mean, look, yeah, the lack of direction is pretty obvious, and you could say, well, that's because of Emma, and Emma has a lack of direction. It just goes anywhere, so how can you criticize the movie for lack of direction if it's based off a book that doesn't have any direction? So it's hampered by it, but just because it's hampered by it, I'm not going to let it off the hook, because, well, don't make the movie then. If, you can't get a coherent structure or narrative going. And yeah, the theme is decent, I'd say. I do disagree with you, how you said it's not really obvious. I do think it is. Not maybe obvious, but you can tell what it is. And obviously, the fact that what people have taken from it, I can't really criticize the movie for that, but yes, it is no doubt funny on a level which is probably funnier than maybe anything in this movie. Maybe that's a bit too harsh, but then again, like we said, it's not really that funny. Definitely not Mean Girls funny. And I went back to see what I gave Mean Girls, Michael, and I gave it a rating of 6.5 out of 10, because I remember thinking the first half was great, the second half was quite poor.
Yeah, okay, that's quite generous, I would say. I don't know what I gave it, but I don't think I gave it. I'll check what I gave it while you're talking.
Okay, and for this movie, I think it's not as good as Clueless. The comedy and the lines aren't as funny, and also what it's satirising isn't as good as what I guess Mean Girls is attempting to satirise it, or it's not a good a target. So therefore, it's going to have to be marked down, and the lack of direction hurts as well. And like you said, the incest is a big problem. And we can't ignore it. But yeah, I guess 4 out of 10 seems fair to me for Clueless. Same as Caddyshack. So 4 out of 10.
It's quite funny to me, by the way. Actually, I was like, I said 6.5. That seems a bit generous. I literally gave Mean Girls exactly a middling 6. So there we go. Turns out we both agree. So there we go.
Yes, we both agree. That's great. So Michael, what are we going to be doing next week?
Next week we are going to be doing Memento, which notoriously I accidentally watched when I thought 2 weeks ago. But yeah, we're going to be doing Memento. It's going to be a good time. Yes, we're going to be doing that because of the release of Tenet finally coming out. So yes, of course, yeah. So thank you for listening. We've been selecting and reflecting on Clueless, and it seems that based on our ratings, that's the people who made the movie were clueless. How about that, Michael? I've been wanting to make a joke like that for ages, and I keep missing every opportunity I can have to do it, so that's a shame. Yeah. Now, I mean, look, people like it, and like we said at the beginning, it's probably not meant for us. Like, we're probably not the demographic that Clueless was targeting, and likes Clueless to this day, so that may explain why we don't like it as much as other people. Join us next week for Memento. Who have you been, Michael? I've been Michael. I've been Luke. Thanks for listening, and goodbye. Goodbye.